Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You have made it to APTA's Fight the Cut rally, where tonight we are taking the fight to Medicare. My name is Kate Gillard. I am Senior Regulatory Affairs Specialist at APTA, and I'm so excited to be hosting this rally tonight. And that is because the focus tonight is on something that is particularly important to me, and that is regulatory advocacy. So as you guys already know, there's a huge 9% cut scheduled to take place in 2021. And APTA and our members have already done an awesome job letting Congress know that they need to take action to stop the cut from being implemented. Last I checked, we had sent 54,000 letters to Congress. But now it's time to take some of that energy and devote it towards the people who actually implemented the cut in the first place. And that is the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, also known as CMS. So APTA has decided to try to go for a pretty lofty goal, and that is to get 30,000 comment letters submitted to CMS before the October 5th deadline, demanding that CMS not implement these cuts to physical therapy. And, that's what tonight's rally is all about. So later on, we're going to hear from the Director of Regulatory Affairs to kind of break down how we got here and why it's so important to talk to CMS as well as Congress. We're also going to hear from private practitioners, people who own clinics, to talk about the impact that these cuts are going to have on the profession. And we're also going to talk to some young professionals about how they've put themselves in the driver's seat of their own profession and have really taken the reins as far as advocating for themselves and their profession. But first, we have a very special first speaker. It is none other than APTA's CEO, Justin Moore. Hey, Justin, are you out there?
I am.
Hey, Justin. Thanks so much for joining us. I see you're at the office pulling a late night. I think everybody at APTA is working all hands on deck to fight this cut, and clearly you are too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been all hands on deck, and I've been very proud of our government affairs team and the entire physical therapy profession and community. We're setting a new standard in our grassroots advocacy, and as you said, the next target is CMS.
Yeah, and so I think maybe as our first speaker, you could kind of inspire us a little bit, because I know some people feel like, I'm just one voice. How am I going to get the government to change its mind about something? But as CEO, you've witnessed times where the profession came together and accomplished a victory through advocacy. So maybe you can talk about some of the times that we've delivered wins.
Yeah, absolutely. Advocacy has been a long history for APTA and the physical therapy profession. And it's sort of based on two different things. It's the power of one and the power of community. And we've seen one person make a difference, whether that goes clear back in the early 1970s when somebody like Clem Eishen from Oregon went to the Hill to make sure that we had independent billing status under Medicare, or whether just recently some of the efforts that PPS President Sandy Norby made on ensuring locum tenens. So we've seen the power of one in this profession demonstrate great value and help us get policy change. We've also seen the value of great big communities coming together in physical therapy, and that was best seen through the repeal of the CAP efforts, which the community continued to respond year after year to get delays and moratoriums, and then finally got the CAP repealed. But we have a long history of advocacy in this profession, and what's going on right now is exciting for the profession in an advocacy standpoint, because the cut is going to be such a detrimental impact if it goes into effect. So we really appreciate everyone out there that's taking the time to make a difference, and who knows which letter will help us put it over the top. But that's our goal, and it's going to take everybody being involved in generating these responses.
Absolutely. I mean, I can't imagine how many people thought the therapy cap would never get repealed, but we did it. We stuck with it. We used our voices, and it happened.
Absolutely. Persistence is part of the game in advocacy, and it takes two things: persistence and passion. And I think physical therapy community is showing the passion we have for our patients. The passions we have to be able to provide needed services. And those services are only going to grow in need as we begin to come out of this pandemic, as we begin to address the surge of patients that are going to show up as elective surgeries in the healthcare system comes back to its full strength. So keep doing it, keep preserving, keep leading with that passion, and we're excited. I think the team, as you guys know, generating over 10,000 comments to CMS already is extraordinary. But tonight's just the kickoff. We hope to build on that and take it to the next level.
Absolutely. Thank you, Justin. That is, such a great example and such a good story about how passion really drives this profession. Because you guys, I don't need to tell you that you got into this profession because you wanted to help people, right? You wanted to help, your patients get better. But one of the ways you help your patients get better is by making sure that they have access to these services. And so, as Justin clearly indicated, when we come together and we use our voices and we let the government know that they're making the wrong decision, we can implement change. So I'm feeling inspired. I hope you guys are feeling inspired. Let's take some of that energy and talk about what we really need to do. Like, what are the nuts and bolts to get this done? So in order to do that, we're going to bring in one of my favorite people at APTA. And I'm not just saying that because she's my boss, but this is Kara Gator, the Director of the Regulatory Affairs Department. Hey, Kara, how's it going?
Hey, Kate. Thanks for that welcome.
Well, it's true. I love being on the Regulatory Affairs team. That's why I'm so excited about tonight and talking about regulatory issues. So let's just jump right in. Maybe you should give us like a brief summary of how we got here, where these cuts are coming from, and why CMS is the people we should be reaching out to right now.
Sure, that's a great question. So for a little bit of background, CMS initially proposed this cut last summer in the 2020 Physician Fee Schedule Proposed Rule, which is an annual rule where CMS releases proposed policies and changes to regulations and solicits public comment. And so it was last summer that CMS indicated in the rule that they would be implementing a estimated 8% cut to physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech language pathology. Now, the rationale was because CMS was proposing and continues to propose to increase the payment rates for certain office outpatient evaluation and management services, which are primarily billed by primary care physicians and some other specialty physicians. But with the fee schedule rule, there is a statutory requirement that CMS maintain what's called budget neutrality. So if CMS makes significant increases to the fee schedule in terms of payment, then they must find offsetting ways and reductions. And so they do that by applying an adjustment to what's known as the conversion factor, which is essentially a dollar amount that's used to multiply each code's value, known as a relative value unit. I realize I'm going into a lot of the weeds here, but essentially CMS is proposing to reduce that dollar amount conversion factor, and that's where this estimated cut comes from. And so last year, CMS had estimated it would be an 8% cut. Obviously, we were extremely upset by what CMS had proposed, and last year, we actually had about 11,000 letters sent from the physical therapy profession to CMS telling them not to implement the 8% cut. And APTA had obviously sent letters. We also met with CMS last year. And in the final fee schedule rule published on November 1st of 2019, CMS indicated that they would be moving forward with the policy, but that they recognized that there were a lot of concerns about these cuts, because it's not just the therapies who are looking at a cut. It's actually about 36 different providers who are looking at varying amounts of cuts come 2021. So over the last 14 months, essentially since that proposed rule came out, we've been doing everything we can to stop the cut from taking effect come 2021. And that means other letters to CMS, other meetings with CMS. We formed a coalition with both physicians and non-physicians to ensure that our messaging was aligned. We've had numerous letters sent from Congress to CMS expressing concerns with the cuts, telling them not to implement the cuts. Obviously recognizing that it's inappropriate to pit providers one against another. And unfortunately, CMS essentially explains it away as, well, it's a mathematical consequence, it's unintended, But our policy objective is to obviously increase reimbursement for the evaluation and management services, and that requires us to offset those payment increases with decreases to others. So now fast forward to August of 2020. CMS releases the 2021 physician fee schedule proposed rule. They again propose a cut to about 36 different provider groups or specialties. And some of the cuts are even worse than they were in last year's rule. So we've launched an all-out effort to stop this cut. And as you mentioned, and as others have mentioned, obviously there's been a huge focus on taking the fight to Congress and urging Congress to stop the cut from taking effect. But what's also important is to advocate to CMS, as you said, the people who actually proposed the cut, because they also have the authority to mitigate the cut or even eliminate it potentially. But recognizing that there are not that many options available to CMS to mitigate the cut, that's why legislative advocacy has been so important and has played a critical role in our efforts to fight the cut. Because unless CMS takes action in the fee schedule final rule, which will be released around December 1st, unless they take action, it's going to take effect. But that's why we need Congress to pass legislation in anticipation of CMS not changing the policy in the final rule. But that doesn't mean that we should not focus our efforts on fighting the cut to CMS, because in fact, fighting the cut and expressing our opposition to CMS is very important in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, Kara, I think that's a really great. And first of all, I love it when you get in the weeds. I love talking about relative value units and things like that. But I think one thing that I'm hearing from you that I want to express to people is that we have to do both. You can't just talk to Congress or just talk to CMS, because a lot of times if you talk to Congress, they'll go, well, what does CMS say? And if you haven't been advocating to CMS, then they're going to say nothing. And the same thing's true on the other side. If you only go to CMS and don't go for a congressional fix, you might lose the fight that way. So it's really important that you do both. So if you're out there watching and you think, well, I've already sent my letter to Congress, I'm done. You're not done. You have to send some comment letters to CMS as well. And speaking of those comment letters, Kara, maybe you can talk a little bit more about the significance of like our 30,000 comment letter goal and what kind of pressure that's going to put CMS under if they really do end up receiving that many letters.
Yeah, so it's important to note first that I'm not aware of any instance when the physical therapy profession has actually sent 30,000 letters in response to just one rule. So the mere fact of reaching 30,000 would put on CMS's radar that obviously they already know we are upset with the cut, we have concerns, and we've offered numerous recommendations to mitigate or eliminate the cut. But 30,000 letters speaks volumes. And there's several reasons why. One, the louder and stronger our voice, the harder it is for CMS to justify finalizing the policy without any change. Because the whole point of issuing these rules is to solicit public feedback, and the public needs to participate in that process. Otherwise, CMS looks at the number of comments and says, well, we didn't get that many comments. It looks like we can just go ahead because there was so little opposition, for example, in this, if referring to this policy. So that's why we need that volume of comments, louder and stronger than ever before, because this cut will be so detrimental. It's also important because the public comments on the proposed rule becomes a part of the formal record. And when Congress is looking at how many comments were submitted, or the media or others, they can go and see, wow, there were 30,000 comments from just one profession opposing this. How in the world could CMS, if they choose to, finalize this policy without modification? And speaking of Congress, obviously, we've all said Congress has heard really loud and clear that the profession opposes the cuts, and we need Congress to take action in case CMS doesn't take action in the final rule. but they've also expressed that they want to see providers and patients send comments to CMS and express their opposition, because that is the formal mechanism by which the public can actually voice their opposition.
Yeah, Kareth, that's a really great breakdown. I think, just being a regulatory nerd myself, I want to highlight some things like the fact that CMS is legally required to read every comment. So you're not just sending this letter into some void where, it's going to be thrown in the garbage. It's going to be read, it's going to be considered, and CMS has to actually respond to it as well. So it is an important thing to do, and people are going to be reading what you say. And so for anybody who's wondering, okay, well, how do I do this? What do I say? APTA just recently launched a new platform that's going to make it quicker and easier than ever for you to submit comments. And I think, Kara, you're going to give us a little demo, right?
That's right. It's extremely easy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can follow along with me as I walk us through this. Or maybe not.
And while you're setting that up, I'll give you a minute. Screen sharing is always kind of weird and hard to get going. But we've already got over 11,000 comments. So the profession is on the task. We are working on it. We're going for it. We just need that next 19,000 to really drive it home, because other professions are also commenting on this, guys. We've got doctors saying, yeah, we love this pay raise we're getting. We've got other professions saying, we don't want to get cut. So, if we don't speak up and make our, put our stake in the ground about how this is going to affect us, then CMS, like Kara said, is going to assume that we're okay with it.
Yep, exactly. So I figured out the technology, and here we go. So when you visit the APTA website, you'll see at the top an orange banner, and it says, submit your comments to Medicare to stop the cuts, and you'll click on Take Action Now. It will bring you to the APTA Patient Action Center, where you will want to scroll down. And right now, this is the only comment opportunity listed. So you'll see submit your comments to CMS as the header, and then you'll see this, submit your comment to oppose the 9% Medicare cut. And you will click here, which will bring you to another page. It looks just like this. And look, it even recognizes me. I'm in Alexandria, Virginia. So you'll scroll down and you'll see that this is the body of the letter that will be submitted to CMS. You can add your own personal story about how you feel about this cut and how it will impact you and your patients. Or if you don't want to or don't know what to say, don't worry. We've already drafted a whole letter for you. And all you need to do is which actually I've already sent a letter, so that's why it's listing my address. But you would just right here enter your name and address, your email address, and your address, and you would press send message. And it's as easy as that. And I timed it, and I think it took me 40-ish seconds to complete all of that. So it really is under a minute to lend your voice to this effort and tell Medicare that you absolutely oppose the cuts and that they must take action to stop the cut in the final rule.
Thanks, Kara. There's pretty much no excuse why anybody hasn't sent comments yet. In the amount of time we've been live, you could have sent a comment letter 19 times. So we're really, at APTA, we're really trying to make it as easy as possible for you to do this. We know that you didn't go to school to be a lobbyist, but you have to do your part to defend the profession. And speaking of the profession, we've heard from APTA. Now I think it's time to turn the perspective around and hear from some members who are going to be particularly hurt by this cut should it be implemented. So the first member I'm going to bring up is Summereddy. He is a physical therapist and practice owner in New York. Hey, Vinod, how's it going?
Hey, Kate, how are you?
I'm doing great. And I imagine you're doing good, but I can also imagine you must be losing sleep over these cuts being a practice owner. Can you talk about how this is going to impact your business?
Oh, man, it's going to be pretty tough. It is an issue already with COVID that we had to go through just to get ourselves into a position where, we got ourselves back to doing what we do before, which is treating patients, getting them better. And with the increased challenge of having COVID in patients who have been off of therapy and people that need to have had elective surgeries that have been held off, now we have to take, I have to take my business and actually bring it back to a certain level that it was at beforehand, and then also make up for it. So having these cuts come in here in the beginning of the year is absolutely disastrous. Most physical therapy private practice owners and practices around 9% of a particular payment from a payer, particularly Medicare, is a lot of a profit, and that profit is a very important thing toward considering how we go in the future as far as treating patients and helping them, and also allowing the field to grow, right? Because patients are going to need the service. We're an important part of the future for healthcare for a lot of the patients. And by having these cuts, it really does have a significant limitation. And I could tell you from firsthand, with COVID being a big factor in New York, because we are about 30 minutes away from New York City, the center of the city. So I could tell you it's going to have a huge detriment to us, Kate.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's already been a tough year for everybody, and in particular, the profession, like Justin Moore was talking about earlier, with elective surgeries all getting shut down. We saw, and then the uncertainty about telehealth. The whole profession was really put on pause for a while. Nobody really knew what to do. And then when you add to this, just when people are kind of starting to build back up, implementing a 9% cut is going to prevent people from potentially fully recovering. And I think, one other thing I wanted to bring up with you, a lot of people might think, maybe I'm not enrolled in Medicare, so Medicare doesn't matter to me. If they get a cut, I'm a cash practice person, or I only accept private commercial insurance. I don't know if you can speak to this, but the Medicare physician fee schedule has some larger impact than some people might think. Can you talk about how it might affect other payers?
Yeah, CMS notoriously is a driver for reimbursement-related determinations, right? Because what CMS does on a federal level is trickle down to commercial payers and payers alike, right? So you start to find that as CMS makes these decisions, other payers tend to follow suit in looking for a way of reductions. And it's just a natural thing that has occurred. It's not something new. It's been going on for many, many years. And it's just another excuse for another payer to pay our profession less. And it's compounded, and there's no reason for it, right? It's not that we are less valuable or our services are deemed less necessary or we're not needed. It's not because of that. It's an arbitrary thing that relates to a budget neutrality that CMS has to kind of implement to find a way of solving other problems in other professions by taking away from us. So it does have a really broad impact toward patients that need that. And our patients, many of the patients, although you're in a smaller cash practice or you might be in a non-Medicare practice, the reality is that a lot of patients do have Medicare and a lot of patients do have commercial insurances. And there's many practices that solely depend on that continuum of care with their patients, not just a one-time experience. Many patients do come back in later years for ongoing therapy. So you start to lose the effective ability for patients to access care, which in turn turns into a potential service, or maybe not a nice facility, or maybe there's issues with patients, people seeing Medicare patients and delivering the care, and that ultimately costs the healthcare system more, because we're here to improve patients objectively and functionally, and that's our job. That's our job in healthcare, is to keep people going, keep people moving, retaining, and also improving their function. So once you start to get into this whole matrix of not having the ability to be paid appropriately for our services, paid less, and devaluing our services, it has patient access issues, and also from a professional issue. If you don't have therapists continually trying to get into the field and aspiring to get into the field because of these cuts and lower salaries and lower payments, there's going to be a problem in the future as far as servicing patients with rehabilitative services, no matter who you are.
Yeah, Vinod, I couldn't have put it better myself. Like, thank you so much for providing some insight on to what's going on in the mind of a practice owner. We know it's turbulent times right now, and I can just say, kind of piggybacking on what Vinod was talking about, I used to work for an insurance company, and our reimbursement rates were directly tied to the Medicare physician fee schedule. So if the fee schedule went down, boom, they automatically went down. So if you think, because you don't do Medicare, you're out of the woods, it's not true. You should still be contacting CMS. So speaking of contacting CMS, folks who are really good at it, we have 3 young professionals joining us tonight. They are recent graduates just beginning their career, and they have already just been rock stars as far as advocating for the profession. And I know the profession's in good hands with these 3. So I'm going to bring them on. We have Riyad Mohammed, a newly licensed physical therapist and recent graduate of the University of North Florida. He's currently the Florida Physical Therapy Association's Director at Large for the Early Professional SIG and is completing his term as a member of the Advocacy Committee for the APTA Student Assembly. We also have Erin Sales, who recently graduated from the University of Rhode Island. She served as the Corps Ambassador of Rhode Island before being selected as the chair of the Student Assembly's Advocacy Project Committee. She also served as the special assistant to the vice speaker and the student delegate for APTA Rhode Island at last year's House of Delegates. Finally, representing PTAs tonight is Molly Dalton. She received not only the 2019 Mary McMillan Scholarship, but also the APTA Student Assembly's Outstanding Student Award. She's a graduate of Somerset Community College Physical Therapy Assistant Program and currently practices in Louisville, Kentucky. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
You guys
Hey.
are new graduates, but your resumes are so impressive that I had to write cards because that is just an outstanding resume that all 3 of you guys have. So let me toss it up to Molly first because I introduced you last. So tell me about your experience with advocacy. Have you contacted your member of Congress? Have you written to CMS? What has your experience been like?
I've had a couple different experiences with contacting representatives, Congress, local reps. It's a lot easier than I think we as students want to think it is because our time is constantly being stretched thin. As new professionals, we think the world is imploding. We're always, we're graduating and studying for boards, and it seems like our time is constantly being demanded from somebody. But kind of like what Kira was saying, the APTA makes it so easy, especially with an app on our phones. It's the PT Action app, and it lists your there's a congressional directory where you can go on and see who is in your state. You can go ahead and contact them, kind of like how we're doing with CMS, the APTA is doing with CMS. You can go on and there are pre-scripted kind of advocacy points that you can send off to your congressional representatives. There are different talking points for congressional representatives. There are things just to keep them in the know about. It's really easy as a student to stay involved. So I've done that as a student and a new grad. And you get alerts anytime there's a call to action from the PT PAC. There's a call to action, and you can just log in using your APTA information, your member information, and just type it up. Takes 20 seconds, easy peasy.
Yeah, excellent. We haven't even mentioned the app yet. And, you can have everything you need right on your phone. Like I've been saying all night, we really strive to make this as easy as possible for you guys. But even though we write all these letters, send out templates for people to use, I feel like, Riyad, maybe you can talk about this. A lot of people feel like they don't know what to say, or they don't know how to say it, or they just don't have any business telling the government what to do. So what would you tell a colleague of yours who felt like that?
So I completely understand where people are coming from with that feeling. I'm pretty fresh out of school, and it can feel like, what do I have to offer at this time? But then I remember I went to PT school. I am a healthcare professional. This personally affects me, my profession, and my patients. So it is both my right and responsibility to say something about this. And also, I think it's important to note that the policymakers want to hear from the people that are affected by this. And then there's the matter of how to express yourself to the federal government. As I said before, I went to PT school. I'm not a lawyer, not a lobbyist. So I understand that it can be intimidating to reach out like that. Thankfully, the APTA solved that issue. They have written a letter for us, and all we have to do is copy and paste. As we showed earlier before, and we've touched on before, it only takes about a minute to do the entire process, and just make sure you say the correct thing.
Awesome. Like we've been trying to say all night, we really do want to make it easy. Another thing I kind of want to talk about is the fact that we need to be getting our friends, our family, our colleagues, our networks, our mailman, our neighbor, anybody who will listen to us. We need to get everybody on board to fight this because, if you pay taxes, then your money goes to fund the Medicare system. And so they have a right to say, I've told my mom and dad to comment. They're not physical therapists, but I'm going to nag them until they do it. So maybe, Erin, you can talk a little bit about how do you get your network involved and how do you spread the word?
Yeah, well, one of the things that you said is that it really is a unifying issue. We're all taxpayers, and therefore we all have this ability and this duty to share our voice and let Congress and CMS know what kind of impact this would have on all of us. And I think it's important that we all share that because we are all going to have different experiences with these cuts if they were to go forward. And we need to make sure that they understand all the different sides of it. And thankfully, the APTA has made that so easy to do. Molly just talked about the app. Kara was talking about everything online. And also, you've put out so many amazing posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and I think I've shared just about all of them. But they're so nice and easy ways to get that information out to everyone because my parents have no idea what a 9% cut to physical therapy reimbursement means, but they can understand what it would mean if a patient isn't able to get the services that they need. And I think if we share that information with as many people as we can, we'll start to see that everyone really sees what impact these cuts would have and that they need to share their voice so that we can make sure we're all able to get the services that we need.
Beautiful. Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you, young professionals. The profession is in such good hands with leaders like you taking over. Thank you for spending your time to talk to us about advocacy. And with that, we are going to be closing the rally soon, but I wanted to let you all know that so far we have submitted 11,667 comment letters. So we only need about 19,000 more letters to reach our goal. The deadline is October 5th. We've given you all the tools you need. It only takes a minute to do it. We've told you to get your friends involved, your family involved. We don't want limited access to PT services for anybody, whether it's Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance. There's no reason for it. So please get involved. Help us take the fight to Medicare and help stop the 9% cut. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It's been a pleasure. And we will be coming back in live tomorrow to give you an update on the comments. So good night and take it easy, everybody.